Hello, everyone. I hope you're having an awesome time at RETCON so far. Our next session is titled Get Smart, Utilizing IoT and Smart Building Technologies Effectively. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage.
Great, thank you so much. We've got a great panel here today. So let's begin with some introductions and then we'll dive right into our questions. Edson, why don't you lead us off?
Awesome, thanks, Andrew. I'm Edson D'Souza. I work with ADT's Multifamily division, where we essentially focus on making apartment communities smart. I've been there for about a year. Prior to that, I was with Dish and Stratus IoT. Stratus IoT, I also focused on smart apartments, and with Dish, really focused on smart technologies for both the residential and commercial space.
Thanks, Edson. We're glad to have you here today. Kelly, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Andrew. My name is Kelly Soljasic. I'm a Senior Vice President with LaSalle Investment Management. LaSalle is one of the leading real estate investment managers globally. I actually work mostly in our multifamily asset management group and oversee apartment communities in the Midwest and the Pacific Northwest. I've started my career in real estate over 20 years ago and have found myself as the prop tech lead for LaSalle's asset management group as well. So I have had to dig into quite a few of these vendors. So I look forward to our discussion today.
Great, we're glad to have you. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. My name is David Ulrich. I'm the Executive Vice President for Avenue 5 on the East Coast with the job of growing our presence on the East, out in the East. I've been here for about 2 years. Prior to my time at Avenue 5, I ran Kettler Management locally, and prior to my time at Kettler, I spent about 20 years in asset management, 10 years with Federal Capital Partners locally, running their asset and construction management group, and about 8 years with Equity Residential. Most of my time at Federal Capital Partners is probably where I spent focused on prop tech, looking at opportunities in our ownership role in ways to improve operations, improve sort of the experience overall, whether it be systems to get into buildings, whatever it may be from that perspective. So I don't have that specific role that Kelly and Edson have at this point, but definitely am involved and am currently on an advisory board for a small startup maintenance group as well.
Wonderful. And my name is Andrew Beech. I come from Mill Creek Residential, and as a developer, builder, owner, and operator, within the community technology group, I serve as our lead for the standardization of all of our building systems, access control, telecom, building integration. And so, you know, my team and I work through all of our national standards and helping direct our ability to take advantage of opportunities in prop tech and smart apartments. So let's go ahead and jump into the first question here. We have, do smart buildings really lead to new leases? And what lasting impact do they have on resident retention? So let's go ahead and dive in. Dave, Kelly, Edson, who'd like to lead us off?
Okay, I can take a quick shot if you'd like. I would say I have a couple thoughts on that. I think that idea that there's a return on investment with prop tech has sort of been on the table from the beginning of the time I've been involved in this, and we used to constantly hear if you use this, you will get an extra $10 in rent or an extra $25 in rent. I will be honest, in my experience, it's been hard to target that and really tie it down and say, yeah, there truly is a return that I can point to for using these systems. I think my experience with it would be that there's two issues there. One is there's a little bit of a sort of a risk of systems becoming expected product, whether it be, you know, a latch or you know, some package delivery system or whatever it may be, that it becomes an expected product and not necessarily a value add component in the environment you're in. And there's certainly a component of sort of whether or not that value that you paid for today is going to be there tomorrow. Although I do think there is a positive impact on the resident experience, whether it's the prospect coming in or from a renewal perspective, in the sense that that overall experience that they get when they come in the door, if it's from, let's call it a tour 24 or something like that, when you walk in and you get that virtual experience coming in, and the process through living there, whether it's a maintenance app of some sort to the point of leaving, if that experience is smooth and seamless, then I think there is a sort of marginal value add to what you're getting from that, in the sense that people will stay with you and probably recommend you going forward.
I can probably add to that. What we've seen is a lot of these startups, sometimes you get paid more. If you're an early adopter, you may get leases that other properties aren't getting if you have these new technologies. If you wait too long to adopt the technology, then it's more expected and less of a dazzle point for your property, less of a selling point, and more of an expectation. And then you're just getting what's market at that point and not getting paid additional dollars for it. The other thing is smart technology right now does attract a higher income renter. So you may end up with more qualified renters or people who are able to absorb more annual increases in their rent. So the renter might not leave. It also obviously is smart. A lot of smart technology in your building allows for self-guided tours. You know, if you have that exterior common area and unit access built into your smart property, you can get additional tours through those self-guided tours for people who cannot leave work midday during office hours, or who have children that they watch, or for other reasons. So you're going to get tours that other people are missing out on if you don't have the self-guided tours. So you may get additional leases that way. And then the other point is the more convenient in general, it's not just for smart home, but the more convenient and automated you make your renter's life, the more likely they are to not want to leave and to leave that comfort and go to a property that doesn't have the conveniences that they're used to. So I believe that does help with retention, and smart homes definitely adds to that.
Yeah, adding on to your point about just building on that convenience, I think a lot of what we've seen and experienced is a lot around access control and investing in access control, which opens up all of the different services, amenity reservations, package delivery, so food delivery. There's so much that's tied to a seamless access control. Being able to give someone that experience where you're able to, and it's not always that there's one experience that our residents want. Different people, some want to be able to do it from their phone, some want a fob, some want a card or a sticker that goes in the back of their phone. So many people just want options. And I think, one of the values that we've seen really is taking away barriers. And by giving plenty of options, it allows us to really have something to offer everyone who comes through our communities, and a way to kind of give different opportunities. And that just essentially equips our associates on site. The biggest thing is to give them as many opportunities and as many ways to say yes as they can, so that we can, whether it's retention or new leases, they have the opportunity to just say, yes, we do have that. We have a way for you to take advantage of that. We're not going to restrict your opportunities.
Absolutely. And I wanted to actually respond to that as well. So for us, I would say, 7-8 years ago, there was more of a focus of, hey, is there a need for smart technologies? And now we're getting to the point in 2020 where that expectation has come, where most places do have them. Where we typically are focused is how to adapt to our communities. So whatever our apartment communities want, we have to figure out solutions on how do we make that happen. Most recently with COVID, there was a big focus on unattended showings. I mean, I could tell you a year ago, that was never something that was a big focus that people were asking for. March, April, May comes around, there was a huge need for it. So what we typically have to balance as a smart technology provider is how do we utilize software and user experience, and how does it look to the resident as well as the property management company? We don't want to put any additional workload. We do not want your staff to become IT. So how do we do that through software and just become more adaptable? So that's been the biggest change we've had is need versus expectation, and how do we utilize software over hardware?
Well, let's go ahead and jump into our second question. Appreciate everyone's input there. So what role does infrastructure play in creating smart buildings? And what are the biggest hurdles that you need to overcome when establishing the right infrastructure for buildings of the future? So Edson, why don't I have you lead us off here and talk a little bit about the role that infrastructure plays and how that design and build process is critical.
Totally. Typically, whenever we enter a new build, we try to get in at the earliest stage possible because there's a whole bunch of different things that kind of come into play. Building materials that are used, how far down does the actual building go? What type of technologies are you wanting in unit versus outside in the common areas? So I would definitely say infrastructure is very important, and it's always a lot easier with new construction, right? With new construction, we can figure out, hey, what technology best fits? Now, in today's age, there's a ton of technologies with Wi-Fi, Z-Wave, Zigbee, just a ton in general. And with our partnership with Google, there's going to be even more technologies coming from that. So I can tell you from an infrastructure perspective, infrastructure is important, and it really helps, especially in areas that are very densely populated and you're using a lot of concrete for the material. And the biggest hurdles you typically have are those materials, especially if the property is, there's units below ground level. Those are typically the things that are affected. There's solutions that are available. It's just typically best to start the process at the very beginning as opposed to later in the stage.
So Edson, you made a comment there that I wanted to follow up on. You said that you were talking about there's a lot of different technologies. There's a lot of different like Wi-Fi, Z-Wave, Zigbee. How would you advise people who there's so many options? How do you design for those? How do you make sure that you're going far enough, but not, putting in everything, if you will?
Totally. I typically ask folks at the very beginning, what are they trying to get out of it, right? There's a balance of operational efficiencies. How do we make everything simple? But also how are we able to get an additional cost out of our residents, right? So figuring out the balance, then we would typically move on to the products, right? So if you're looking for operational efficiencies and thermostats and access control are big to you, let's focus on that. And you essentially have to work backwards on the solution for the in-unit products, and then take that same math and apply it to the common areas, right? I would say now it's even more popular that everybody asks us like, hey, we want an app for our product. We want to be able to get access to the gym from our phone, but we want the gym to be locked after 10 o'clock, right? So you kind of create those parameters and walls of what do you want, what don't you want, and then you find the product. So I typically recommend folks to figure out what is the experience you want your resident to have, what is the experience you want your on-site team to have, and then work backwards with the hardware. Because like I said in the prior question, now we can typically get software to do what hardware couldn't do in the past.
Great. And Dave and Kelly, what have you two seen from an asset standpoint in terms of throughout the lifespan of an asset and different infrastructures that you've come across being able to prepare you for taking advantage of an opportunity or an opportunity that you may have missed out on because of the infrastructure? What would you share with us from lessons learned?
Sure. Well, I'd say this has changed based on the month you're looking at it. Early on, it was really hard because all of the prop tech companies did not integrate. So you may have a smart home system in your units that didn't integrate with your common area access, which didn't integrate with your exterior door access, as well as your, property app that, you're hoping to get it all under one place. So that's obviously was an issue. I think more and more are integrating now, so it's not as big of an issue. And like Edson was saying, a lot of the prior infrastructure issues, I feel like they've solved a lot of that. Obviously, new construction doesn't have as big of an issue, but when you're retrofitting an older building, you come up with some things. But generally, I found that you can get around most issues as long as you're willing to spend the money on the product that is the solution. There's a couple things that I've seen infrastructure-wise that have been points that I think people don't know are issues. And as you have to do your homework before selecting specifically a smart home company, you need to know, again, the connection protocol, like Edson was saying, would want cellular, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, you know, like what is your preference? Because depending on that, you can do different things. You can, you know, if it uses one protocol, you might not be able to unlock your apartment door for the dog walker from work. You might have to be standing in front of your door. So there's that issue. But also there's properties that have types of doors with locks, like mortise locks, and not very many of the smart home systems have locks that work with mortise, those type of locks. There's special locks, which basically I was told, if you want to use those, if you want to use our product, you have to buy new doors. So that's a whole different expense level. They're also, not all smart thermostats work with all HVAC systems. So obviously that's something you're going to have to investigate on each property, what type of system you have, what type of doors you have, and which systems work with both. Obviously, if you have a high rise versus a garden style, you're going to be utilizing different systems as well, and which ones work better on those. So that's really more the infrastructure issues that we deal with at the property level. We don't particularly have as much issues where like the walls are blocking the Wi-Fi signal as much anymore, because there are solutions for that.
Great.
Yeah, and I would say, in my experience, that the walls blocking signal have been an issue on some properties that were built a couple of years ago. I'm not sure that I've seen much of that lately, but part of that's also been focused on how the design works. You know, I was leaning toward probably something more that Kelly focused on, that you know, garden style versus high rise, and access to Wi-Fi in general. If you're trying to put systems onto a platform, certainly in a garden style community, it can be more difficult. I think there have been solutions that have come to the table in the last year or two, where there's more reasonably priced product that can get out there. And I was talking to some folks from Boingo the other day, for instance, about sort of broad approach to this. So yeah, I mean, my focus on infrastructure was more about what access to systems was really the impact I would have out there. And, do you have Wi-Fi in your property? Can you get it across the board? And, what's the difference between the high rise and the garden style, for instance?
Well, and generally you can get it across the board. It's just a matter of if you want to pay for it.
Right. And that's always the issue. So it's, it's the cost involved, which I think we'll probably get into a little later here, but that certainly becomes a focus.
Yeah, and we've taken a lot of time to just look through even putting extra wiring through our corridors in strategic areas, and knowing that a lot of these future technologies run on, Cat 6 or 5E. And so I think there's just a lot of importance in even building up systems, whether it's fiber or learning what carrier grade is, so that our hope is that in the long term, if we have the right pathways or cabling through the building in our risers, that we are able to take advantage of opportunities. We may not know exactly what those are today, but like you said, it changes quickly. Even the question and the answer are different today than they were weeks and months and a year ago. So yeah, I think this kind of leads into our next question. As we talk about connectivity in the building, let's go into 5G. And does 5G have enough potential to make a significant impact on multifamily operation? So I know this is a big topic these days, and I'd love to hear what people are seeing and experiencing in 5G.
Well, I don't mind going first there. I can tell you I've looked into this quite a bit, and basically from what I understand is 5G is not really going to affect multifamily operations, aside from potentially getting paid a little rent if you get a tower put on your building, because generally right now it's just one carrier. So say you get an AT&T tower either on your building or nearby, which will make people who have AT&T 5G's cell signal stronger, much better. But it's not gonna, their laptops won't be able to use it generally unless they're buying a new laptop that's 5G capable. And there are other Wi-Fi enabled devices, unless they're replacing them in the near future, are not gonna be able to benefit from that as well. Properties are still gonna have cable solutions, telecom solutions outside of 5G. It'll make their cell signal nicer for people who previously didn't have great signal in the urban environment, but probably out in the suburbs, I don't think it's going to affect it very much anytime soon in the next couple of years. And again, you still have to have those other solutions for the rest of your devices until everything is upgraded.
Yeah, and I think even some of the challenges we face with 4G and connectivity are only going to be amplified by, 5G being high frequency just isn't going to penetrate building material as well. Low E glass, a lot of the building materials that we use now just aren't as friendly to 5G. So, as we've looked at it, I think looking at a strategy that involves more Wi-Fi based, like from the inside out as you're designing it, makes a lot more sense to be able to provide residents a way to reliably have connectivity, like you were talking about with your unlocking a door or whatever that experience is. Having your cell phone and devices connected all the time just makes everything better. From all of our surveys, it's the number one amenity is internet and connectivity that's important to our residents. And as we look at like bulk managed Wi-Fi, I think there's a real opportunity to even kind of close the book on some of the 5G conversation, provide bulk managed Wi-Fi, provide gigabit, symmetrical internet throughout the building into residents' homes, and give an experience that, the reality of 5G is it's just the speed of internet. It's fast internet. So if we can achieve that in other ways, maybe we can eliminate that hurdle.
Right. But unless you have an internet tower close by your building for every internet provider that every cellular provider that your residents use, AT&T, Verizon, et cetera.
Right.
Basically, you're only going to capture a portion of your residents. It's basically not a solution. It's only gravy on top of whatever your telecom solution is. It's a nice to have, but it at least as of right now, technology changes all the time, and who knows how they will be able to adjust it, potentially for us to take advantage of it. But as it stands now, you can't have a building and not provide a telecom solution and assume that the 5G tower next door is going to be that solution.
Yeah, I actually wanted to answer something on this because I feel like it's the most requested. It's the most requested question we get with the least amount of impact when it comes to 5G. Exactly how Kelly said, it's a super strong signal that'll only help you out in multifamily if you have a tower put on, and then you have to find the right tower based off. It's the perfect storm, right? Because you have to find, unless you're going to put 5 different towers on your apartment community, which would look funny. And then you also have to tie the fact that 5G is only available mostly in very metro areas, your Chicagos, your Denvers, your Dallases. So then you even have an even more of a perfect storm. I would say as far as 5G having an impact on multifamily today, it's going to be one of those things that's going to be a trickle down effect 5 to 10 years from now, but something that we typically tell folks, hey, don't worry about this now. There's tons of other solutions available today that'll work better for you for both a retrofit as well as a new construction.
I think we've got pretty good consensus here. Let's jump into our next question. I'm interested to hear your take on this one. Is smart home data valuable for owners and operators? And then I'll just add on to this. If so, what has been your experience, or what is your hope to be able to draw value out of all of this automation and data that is that's being gathered through the community.
Let me take a quick jump on this, and we'll let you guys go after that. But my perspective on data is that the more data we can get, generally the better. I think that I kind of look back at this, and I've used this. People who have talked to me about this will laugh that I say this, but it's going back to Moneyball. I mean, when you look at the idea of what data is available to you, and what you can use that data for, and how you can take that data to make decision-making processes better going forward, is really the critical component from my perspective. It's still a little bit of the wild, wild west, and it's pretty disconnected, but my theory would be that you need to get as much information as you can and then work to figure out how that's going to help you going forward, whether it's utilizing the data from a maintenance operations perspective, whether it's from what group is going to, what resident is going to lease from you, which resident is going to renew, why are they going to do it, all the things that come with that. There's one story I tell on this, that it was a gentleman that we work for right now, that now we manage a property for them, and I've known the gentleman for a while, and we had this conversation where he said, the group that I'm working with has said that we are now leased up and we need to hire a second maintenance person. And I asked him why, and he said, this is his conversation. So because we're 1 per 100, we're now at 200 units, we need to hire a second maintenance person. And he was coming from a commercial background, and he said, well, tell me why we need the second person. And they couldn't answer the question. They said, it's just the metric we use, 1 per 100. And I think that really points to a critical piece. If you have the information, how are my systems running? What's the status of those systems? What's the conditions of those systems? Where is my maintenance guy spending his time? How long is it taking him to replace a refrigerator? How long is it taking him to do filter changes or do a unit turn? If you have that information, it gives you a boatload of power to try and figure out how I'm going to staff a property, whether I might only need 1 person or maybe I need 3, and I can justify it because I have that data. Data is power for us. If we have it, it's huge. So that's more anecdotal. I'm sure that Kelly and Edson, Andrew, you guys have some more specific data, but that's the way I would look at it.
Well, I can tell you that we love having employee data, like you were saying, with the maintenance information and staffing. And we definitely look at, it's not just the number of staff per 100. It's definitely the investment in the systems and the software that also add to that decision. But I think most of the time when people are asking about this question about smart home data, it's more about the residents and their usage of the smart home systems. Like, where do they keep their temperatures, water leaks, when are they accessing the building, their doors, the gym, that kind of data. And I can tell you, as an institutional owner, generally speaking, we don't want that data because we don't want the liability of owning the data and the data security risk. So we actually, I think, eventually will hope that vendors who collect the data, like the smart home vendors, will somehow take on that risk of aggregating and disseminating the information in a usable format where the owners don't have to take on the risk. Because I can tell you, none of the owners that I've worked for in the past want that risk, want to be able to be sued for knowing when people enter and leave their units. But obviously the employee information and timing, of how long it takes a leasing agent to get back on a renewal to a resident, that's obviously all very valuable data, but maybe not, you can't sell that data. That's just more information for us to know how to improve the property.
So for us, what we typically do on our end is we try and figure out what data does the on-site team want to see, what data does the on-site team want the resident to see, and what does the property management want to see. So we kind of do a waterfall effect and figure out what's important. So typically what the property management company wants to see is typically tied to maintenance, right? So how often are we having to change out filters? How do we get access to those filters? How many turns on our door locks before they wind up going bad, things like that. And with the resident, what they typically like to see is, hey, when I'm running my air conditioning, how often is it turning on, things like that. So we'll typically work with that team the property management company and figure out what data do you want to see, what data do you want the on-site team to see that'll help them out with their day-to-day jobs and their day-to-day functions, and then what data do you want your residents to see. Typically, the resident data is the most granular, and it allows the resident to kind of feel like, hey, I'm getting something back from this, because they know they're paying typically an extra fee for all the smart amenities. So we try to bring value to each section. There's no right or wrong way. It's really kind of like what Kelly said. What does the property management company team prefer, and how do we get that to the right people?
And as you said, Kelly, I think you kind of hit it right on the head, which is, you know, as an owner, we want to place our residents' privacy at the highest point. You know, we want them to feel home and to feel comfortable that they have their home, they have their space, they have their privacy. But, you know, there is an opportunity to even improve that experience, whether it's leak detection that allows us to, you know, be on top of any kind of water damage or mitigate our risk. And so that's one that's been important for us, is the kind of the operational pieces of it. And for the common areas, you know, there's good savings, real savings to be had in energy efficiency. I think the key there, though, is just to be able to use your partnerships, use your vendors, to be able to give insights to your team that are easy and actionable, so that they don't have to become an expert in energy management. Our on-site associates don't need to become energy efficiency experts. You know, the goal is to be able to give them good wins in a timely fashion that are direct and easy to say, you know, there's an energy event on Tuesday at this time, and this is the procedure to take advantage of that. You know, just being able to give very clear, actionable items that bring real savings that we can measure, but not more than that. You know, we don't want to take in or present so much, especially to people who are so busy and have so much going on, that we want to be able to make it easy, make it actionable, and hopefully generate some real savings and return around the data. But, you know, there is really a value in where you said about working with your partners and your vendors to share that together. And, you know, Edson working with ADT and others that have that approach to be able to capitalize on the information and take advantage of it, I think is really where the opportunity starts to grow there. So let's go ahead and jump into to our next question here. We're going to start to talk about adoption, and why have many building owners and operators been slow to adopt smart building technologies? What do they need to know as they begin the journey into the Internet of Things? So what is, hopefully we can share some lessons learned and some experiences here about what we all wish we had known as we went and began our ventures.
Well, I can tell you this is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, because this is kind of how I took on the role at my company. I'd say most institutional owners, at least, that haven't adopted smart home technology, it's mainly because they don't know where to invest, because there's so many options out there, and there's very few third-party consultants that are going to tell you what's best for which buildings. And you have to basically get a degree in connectivity protocol, in wiring systems and data security and contract language, which is very different from other types of contracts. There's many things with data storage and emergency recoveries. There's so much to learn, you know, besides just which software looks nice. I'm sorry, which hardware looks nice. So first you have to figure out what your property wants, and then go through the process of finding the right vendors to talk to, evaluating those vendors, making sure the vendor that you want actually also is legally sophisticated enough to deal with your contract system, which we often find is not the case, because many smart home and prop tech companies are startups, and their contracts are kind of a joke, and, you know, compared to what we would need with our size of company. and their data storage also, there's many certifications and compliance regulations that people just aren't quite there yet when they're at that stage of the company as a startup. So it's almost a full-time job to come up with where to go. And it's very difficult to test on one unit. Many of these are, you only really see the full potential when it's property wide. So you're making a really big decision financially before you really see it working in your property. And each property has its own specific needs and challenges. So finding someone in, for instance, asset management, because a lot of times property managers aren't allowed to make those kind of decisions. So you have to have an asset manager who has enough time to find, interview, evaluate, unless your company has an individual that is dedicated to this role, which some do, the heads of directors of innovation. I think a lot of companies are adopting that practice. But aside from that, it's finding the person who makes the decisions financially also have enough time to do their homework, and because each vendor is going to tell you their system is better, right? They're going to say ours is Zigbee, ours runs on Zigbee, it's better. And the next vendor will be like, well, ours runs on Z-Wave, that's way better. This is why you want that. So you really don't have that independent third party telling you which ones are better for which scenarios. So it's just a really big undertaking to that first step for smart home technology. And a lot of other prop tech, it's a little different, but also with the smart home technology, you have to be careful because it's advancing so quickly. If you pick one today and they're out of business in 6 months, you're stuck with a really big investment in a product that's not getting the software upgrades. And also you have to make sure that they're all connected. So is your smart home technology going to communicate with your common area access technology, with your resident app experience? It's just a really big undertaking that it's difficult to do on top of your normal job.
So there's one thing I would take from what you're saying, Kelly, and that's sort of the critical thing that I always think about on this is time and money. And the amount of effort you have to put into it means it limits the audience, I think, in terms of who's actually going to do this. A merchant builder is not likely to spend the time, money, and effort. They're looking for that marginal benefit in their return. They're not going to put that effort into, at least not on a deep level. Certainly a lot of owners that are smaller owners are probably not going to do that. So it tends to limit, I think, the really deep involvement in prop tech solutions really to owner operators and large institutional owners who have decided this is something they want to do. Just broadly speaking, I think there's probably another discussion we could have at some later point of what that does to the property management business in general long-term, because I think it creates a bit of a dividing line between who can take advantage of these solutions and who can't, and where that leads. So that's my answer to this always is the cost and of course the longevity of the solution. Is it something that's going to last more than 2 years? So
yeah, and our company actually had an initiative to test these out and be a front runner in order to get it done, because it's hard to make it kind of happen on the fly off the side of your desk. So I think companies that don't have that initiative, you really have to have that top-down directive. They're not going to go out of their way, take on a part-time job to look into different technologies if that's not what their job is, if that's not what they're getting paid for, and they have to focus on other things. So I think companies really, it has to be a top-down initiative to make sure it gets done and get done well, because it's really easy to be like, all right, I picked that guy, I'm going to sign off on my $300,000 investment and hopefully it works. It might not if you didn't do your homework, or if you didn't even know the right questions to ask. Before I started in investigating smart home technology, I didn't even know what Zigbee was. I didn't know what Z-Wave was. It took a lot of time and energy. I do not have an IT background, and learning those protocols and learning about data security and data storage. It was an education in itself. You could have a class, like a whole degree on that.
And every part of your organization has stake in who you partner with.
That's right.
You know, it's how you build, it's how you operate, it's how the amount of risk you take on. To all of the assets or facets you're bringing up, it affects every group. And so you really need a centralized place that's helping take in everyone's stakeholder concerns and needs, because that partnership, whoever you choose to partner with, and there'll be multiple partnerships through it, it's going to affect everything in terms of how you get the value, and do you really realize the value that you intended to. I think it's just really important too to know exactly, are you going after building a resident experience, or going after operational efficiencies, or you know, what exactly, setting out with that goal in mind is really important, so that you have a clear, you know, compass on where you're headed and what you're trying to accomplish, because otherwise you can get lost in all of the things you could do rather than some of the things you should.
I think communication is a really big issue with it also, because like in the past, asset managers who are located nationwide were trying out, you know, a smart thermostat here or a smart lock there, but they're not necessarily communicating what they did to the other asset managers, you know, or up, because it's only concerning them, their property in their minds, right? So it used to be like you're trying out some new prop tech thing, you know, you, as an asset manager, you put it in place and that's it. That's the information didn't go any further than that necessarily. So we found that multiple asset managers were testing different items unbeknownst to each other, that somebody had already done that work. They had already gone through that process and tested out a unit or a product. And it was just like the duplication of effort was immense. So it took a really big undertaking of data collection and communication and you know, appointing people to be in charge of this type of product and services to make sure that we're not all kind of spinning our wheels and not getting the benefit of other people's work. So if one of my colleagues tries out something, I'm not, and ended up not liking it, didn't work for us for one reason or another that it pertains to our company, you know, I'm not going to go through that effort as well. You know, we'll check that box and move on to the next person. So communication was a big issue as well.
That's really critical. Let's go ahead and jump into our last question here, and we'll kind of give our final thoughts as we share which smart building technologies have the most exciting potential to revolutionize the tenant experience. So let's just focus on that first question and share any final thoughts and kind of go around the horn here as we conclude our time. So we'd love to hear what you're excited about and what you see really bringing value as we all seek to build great experiences. So,
I can start with that, just being on the product side. So for ourselves, I think we kind of have, I have two different answers. So what I'm excited about the most is how products, on our last topic, right, we talked about cost and changing technologies. I'm excited about how products are really focusing on the entire whole community. I know on our focus is how do we have a community approach to everything where it's not just in unit, but also common areas and before you enter the building. So really focusing on that resident experience as well as on-site team experience. And I just like how everything has changed, and that's really been done through software as opposed to hardware. Instead of physically changing a concrete piece of material, how do we do it through software to get a better experience? So ways we can adapt. Second thing is just integrations, right? Where there's so many services that we have available to us. We have dog walkers, we have package services, we have cleaning services. So all the integrations that, as a vendor that we're focused to, hey, let's go figure out how to get that best resident experience and how do we get that best maintenance experience. It's really forced us to work harder and really work smarter as opposed to just adding another bit of hardware. The second thing I'm excited about personally with ADT is Google purchased a portion of our company, and I don't know what that looks like today. I just know that when I look at a company like Google, very tech forward, has a great product with their Nest line, just super excited to see what we're going to do together. Don't know what that looks like today, but excited to see what the future looks like with them.
I'll throw a couple quick thoughts on this myself, just from the property management perspective today. I think one of the critical things that I think about and how this works going forward is efficiency and cost savings. Really, those are the critical things I think of from a property management perspective, and that is sort of in two places. I think, as I referred to earlier, from maintenance operations side, is can I make that more efficient and effective, whether it's a reduction in staff or the ability to work broader, more effectively, get more done. Maybe it's reducing supplier contract and using it internally, or maybe it's vice versa, using more suppliers and fewer staff. And then the same thing on the front side. I mean, I'm looking at the experience we've taken from single-family rentals and working with the virtual tours and that sort of thing, and the self-guided tours. Does that change the way our front office looks? Can we change the number of staff we have in an office and how we approach the leasing process as a whole? So those are probably the broadly brushed the places that I look at as opportunity for property management.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Dave. I'd say that places where we can find more efficient processes and cost savings are institutional owners, kind of where we would love to see additional development. Right now, where we see that is the AI leasing assistance, on the front end, trying to help get some of that busy work out of the way so our leasing team can actually work with residents who are ready to talk to somebody, ready to move forward on a lease or to renew their lease or have an issue at the property. The maintenance apps, like David talked about before as well, I think improving that communication between current residents and our maintenance team is always a really big win. Maintenance teams are often the people that the employees that our residents see the most, and also generally have the most opinions about. If you ask people their opinion about a community, one of the first things they're going to talk about is like the last time they had a maintenance request and how long it took, if they did a good job, if they completed it on time. That's a big one. So I think those new improved softwares that obviously work much better with unit access, smart home type of access is going to be a huge win in the end. Also, building concierge service type apps where you can get your apartment cleaned, groceries delivered into the unit, dogs walked, anything that, again, makes our resident lifestyle more convenient. It makes those people stickier. And I think right now, I think it's mostly seen in the luxury urban environment, but I think that it's going to move more and more toward just market. People are going to want it, and it's becoming more and more easy to get as the digital age continues. And really, if you'd asked me 12 months ago, even probably 2 years ago, the thing that's going to affect it the most is the self-guided tours. I still think beyond COVID, that is going to be a game changer. I think it's going to reduce the amount of time, especially with property management teams that have multiple properties that they work on, or portfolio properties, boutique type buildings, garden style, where they're spread out over many, many acres. It's very difficult for them to manage their time wisely when they're touring people constantly that sometimes don't even want them there. So I think that really that self-guided tour, integrated with a smart home that allow people to get in without somebody being there is going to be a huge game changer in our industry.
And I would say, I just think the thing that I'm most excited for kind of plays into a lot of what you're talking about, Kelly, where it's this bulk managed Wi-Fi. As we looked at the opportunity to be able to bring a value to our residents, be able to bring them a reduced price for internet, which, as we've learned, especially in the past year, is essential to everything. And then be able to take it to an experience that we haven't really been able to achieve for the most part, of Wi-Fi throughout the parking garage, all the common areas, corridors, even through your home, all being gigabit speed internet, being the same network, one login, very easy, seamless. Your home network travels with you when you're at the gym or the pool. And then all of those services connected to a really clean, fast, internet experience that also has the ability to generate some revenue and to kind of be mutually beneficial for everyone. I think that's one thing that we're really excited for and looking more and learning about. So I think this has been a great opportunity. I appreciate all of the expertise and knowledge and wisdom that's been shared. And thank you guys for your time. And thank you, RETCON, for hosting this panel.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We really appreciate your insights, and the audience is giving you a big virtual round of applause. You guys were awesome. All right, if you're looking for your next session, you can go ahead and check out your agenda page to see where you're headed next, or take some time to do some virtual networking with your peers. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.